Tanche and welcome to APTN National News Weekend. I'm Sav Jonesa. The Piikani Nation in southern Alberta has declared a state of emergency over an opioid crisis. The Blackfoot community near Lethbridge has been hit hard by 4 opioid-related deaths in the last week. In a statement on Tuesday, Chief Troy Knowlton says that the declaration of emergency will provide the Piikani with additional resources for emergencies and addiction treatment. He says the nation will be working with RCMP to find and deal with gang members and traffickers he believes are responsible for bringing drugs into the community. Chief Knowlton says grief and mental health counseling are available to those who need it. And he says the opioid crisis across Canada is possibly the biggest public policy challenge of the century. Edmonton Police are continuing to close down 8 encampments across the city. On Tuesday, the 3rd and 4th were dismantled. APTN's Chris Stewart was at one of the locations.
Last month, a King's Bench justice at Edmonton granted an interim order to allow city police to dismantle 8 encampments in the city that were deemed high risk for fires and potential criminal issues. Justice Kent Davidson also ruled that there must be enough room in shelters for displaced people and that they be given notice before evictions begin. If there is no room in shelters, only those that are deemed a risk to public health and safety can be closed. Police sweeps and evictions began during the last week of December. They closed 2 camps, and today 2 more camps near downtown were cleared by Edmonton Police. Jordan Morgan is a volunteer with Water Warriors.
So with the unhoused community, a lot of people feel it's predominantly addicts or people that are living unsavory lifestyles, and that's not the case here. There's people that are students, new Canadians, there's an Indigenous population, there's just a lot of people who have had issues past the COVID pandemic.
Rochelle Gladue is a co-founder of Tawa Outreach Collective, an Indigenous-led street outreach group. She has concerns about the quickness of the evictions.
When they made the announcement on the 15th, they specifically stated no social services, no witnesses on site. They made a plan for up to 150 decampments. And, you know, the last time they had such a large scale mass sweep was last May, which I believe was about 118 decampments within a whole month. So the fact that they wanted to plan 150 in a week with no witnesses was, you know, the most concerning part.
She hopes there are enough shelter beds for everyone displaced.
They planned these encampment sweeps. They've given days notice for even this one. They gave a few days notice. So how do they know a couple days ago that there's enough shelter space today, right? Like it can change in an instant. There
was 2 individuals I spoke to, and obviously they're depressed, they're sad. They're trying to consolidate all of their life into a very small amount of space.
Floyd Lubican says he sleeps in a shelter and has been in encampments many times. He told APTN that hotels need to be built so that everyone has a warm place to sleep.
A cheap hotel, because the hotels, they're expensive. An arm and a leg, man, And when you're homeless and you're poor, they should at least have a place. Like they got shelters, but you have to be in a certain time, and they get filled. They fill up right away.
More evictions are expected tomorrow and in the upcoming days. Edmonton Police Services declined to speak to APTN, saying that the situation is fluid and they will provide updates in the future. Justice Davidson will hear an injunction on January 11th to stop future encampment evictions. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse marked the new year by receiving the highest honor for her leadership in a ceremony that took place on the Piikani Nation on New Year's Day. Woodhouse accepted the invitation to participate in the ceremony from Elder Leonard Weasel Traveler and Chief Troy Knowlton. The headdress transfer validates Woodhouse's achievements, and the eagle feathers are blessed to support her leadership for upcoming travels and challenges. Manitoba RCMP say a 30-year-old man is in custody after a shooting that caused some northern communities to go into lockdown. The shooting happened Wednesday morning at St. Teresa Point, over 400 kilometers north of Winnipeg. RCMP say a 35-year-old male was shot and has non-life-threatening injuries. St. Teresa Point and 2 nearby communities went into lockdown, but that was lifted Wednesday evening. RCMP say an investigation is ongoing and charges have not been laid as of yet. 2023 began with the loss of an Algonquin hockey legend from Kitigan-Zibi First Nation. And that old saying, out with the old and in with the new, doesn't ring true for 2024 as many old issues will return to Parliament Hill. Here's Annette Francis with more from Ottawa.
The Algonquin assassin and former NHLer Gino OIC passed away on January 15th. He had 12 seasons as an enforcer for 4 NHL teams, including the Vancouver Canucks and Montreal Canadiens. 9 years ago, OIC was diagnosed with a rare disease that affected his heart. He was laid to rest in his home community of Kitigan-Zibi in Quebec.
I was shocked. We knew it was coming eventually. We didn't think it would be that soon, but the way I choose to look at it is after the first bout he had with that disease, we got an extra 9 years with him, and I count us very fortunate for that.
9-year-old Sebastian Mawadi is OIC's grandson. Although he was too young to watch Papa Gino play in person, he's seen highlights.
He was a protector of lots of people. Whenever the other teams picked on one of his guys, he always attacked.
But what will he miss most about his Papa Gino?
His kindness, generosity. He was unlike any other person I ever met.
A century-old dispute in Northern Ontario over annual treaty payments will be coming to a close in the new year. After years in court, 21 First Nations are about to finalize a $10 billion settlement agreement with the federal and provincial governments.
Well, I think it's been a long time coming. We've been fighting the 2 levels of government for some time now on past compensation, trying to get what was coming to us. Our members have always, kind of grown accustomed to the $4 a year, but really never understood a lot of what was said in the treaty until this court case.
The Robinson-Huron Treaty was first signed in 1850. It set aside lands for each community to maintain their right to hunt and fish, and included annuity payments to individuals which were supposed to increase. That only happened once, in 1874, to the current $4 a year. 80-year-old Joyce Tababadang from Wasauksing has vivid memories of the discussions over treaty payments as a child.
When I was about 8 or 9 years old, my grandfather used to have caucus meetings before they'd go to Ottawa. And I would sit in the meeting and make sure their water glasses were full and their ashtrays were empty, and I'd sit there all day listening before they'd caucus for 2 or 3 days and then they'd go. But I was just young, but I remember that was the big subject, the annuities. There was nothing happening there.
Negotiations on raising the annuity above $4 a year will begin after the settlement agreement is finalized. Meanwhile, Bill C-53, the Métis self-government legislation, will continue to weave its way through Parliament. The legislation has been a major point of contention between First Nations in Ontario and the Métis Nation of Ontario. First Nations argue there are no historical Métis communities and no Métis people from Ontario. Former MNO President Tony Belcourt disagrees.
The Métis Nation of Ontario registry requires those who register to provide evidence that they are descendant of an historic Métis community. And that registry has been reviewed many times for its veracity and validity.
Chief Linda McVicker of the Animkee-Wazing First Nation in northwestern Ontario asked that the bill not pass. During a House of Commons committee studying C-53, she said the Métis of Ontario are misrepresenting themselves, and passing the bill would make a mockery of her community, along with other treaty rights holders recognized under the Constitution. However, Liberal MP Jaime Batiste pointed out that the Powley decision already recognizes Métis as having a constitutional right to hunt.
I guess the difficulty that we have, though, is that the Powley decision is based out of Ontario. How do we get around the fact that for 20 years we've established that Powley is law in Ontario and then asked to take out the Ontario Métis out of the only recognized Section 35 precedent in Canada?
Powley was about hunting moose, right? This is about self-government you're talking about, and you're talking about treaty. In the bill, it does say treaty. And you can't talk about treaty without talking about a land base. So Powley was about harvesting rights. And we have cases that we've taken to court, hundreds of them, about harvesting rights as well. So there's a big difference.
The bill will return to committee for consideration in the new year before heading to the Senate. Miigwech for sharing your stories. We look forward to bringing you more in the new year. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
We have to step aside for a moment, but first, here's a look ahead to next week.
I'm Tamara Pimentel, a former RCMP officer who launched a class action lawsuit to end systemic racism in the force, makes a career change.
They didn't care if I was dead or alive, the RCMP.
How she went from being a poster child as the first First Nations female officer in Manitoba to playing a key role in a landfill search for 3 Indigenous women.
The search will happen, and we will find them. There is no other way.
I'll have Marge Hudson's story soon on APTN National News.
In November, Hydro-Quebec introduced a new action plan that will focus on energy transition and respond to increased electricity demand. One of the priorities is to initiate partnerships with all First Nations in Quebec. Maricela Amador has more.
Évidemment, pour les véhicules électriques, on a besoin de batteries. Donc, on a besoin pour ces usines éventuelles de plus d'électricité.
Quebec Premier François Legault made that statement during a press conference for the inauguration of the Lac-Romaine hydroelectric complex in the province's Côte-Nord region, a few weeks before the release of Hydro-Quebec's Action Plan 2035. He triumphed the action plan as a true partnership.
Et une des choses que je suis fier, c'est de la façon que ça a été fait avec les communautés Innu.
As part of the plan, the Crown Utility and the Quebec government want to initiate a process of economic reconciliation with First Nations and Inuit. The goal, according to Hydro-Quebec, is to build true economic partnerships with Indigenous communities. However, at that same press conference, Chief Jean-Charles Pietachot of the Innu Council of Iqaluit addressed the issue of royalties, which is not spelled out in the plan.
On a été un des grands donneurs d'emploi. C'est sûr, c'est grâce aux ententes qu'on a eues. Mais reste, comme je vous dis, il faut repenser la façon de faire.
Pietachot told APTN News that he's had discussions with the public utility regarding any potential future hydro development on the Magpie River, also located in the Côte-Nord region of Quebec, about 164 kilometers from the Lac-Romaine complex.
Nous, on avait des préoccupations par rapport à certaines rivières, surtout dans ma région, c'est la rivière Magpie qui doit être protégée en totalité, ne devrait même pas avoir un ouvrage sur cette rivière parce qu'elle est très, très importante. Elle doit rester telle qu'elle est.
In 2021, the Magpie River was the first river in Canada to be granted legal personhood to protect it from future development. The chief said that Hydro-Quebec and the government have assured him that there will be no work on the Magpie River. However, Pietachot is not convinced and would like to have a formal agreement in place.
Souvent, on nous dit qu'on va être consulté, mais c'est la façon de faire, c'est quoi les accommodements, c'est quoi le consentement, ça prend le consentement réellement.
After the action plan was announced, the Innu Nation released a statement emphasizing the need for consultation and the recognition of Aboriginal rights and title. Francis Labbé, a spokesperson for Hydro-Québec, said the utility has been moving towards economic reconciliation for some time now.
Il y a eu des réactions partagées, par contre, il y en a d'autres qui se sont dit enthousiastes par rapport à notre approche. Mais ce que je tiens à vous dire ici aujourd'hui, c'est vraiment là, faut que tout le monde en soit convaincu. Les projets qui vont se faire en partenariat. Et ce ne sera pas des projets qui seront imposés. Et les discussions vont commencer dès maintenant. Et c'est déjà commencé d'ailleurs.
Gilbert Dominique from the Mashtouyatsbang Council said that ongoing discussions with Hydro-Québec have been positive and added that for his community, the first step towards economic reconciliation is to build a relationship on a nation-to-nation basis with Hydro-Québec, who represents the government's interests.
Avant, effectivement, de voir comment est-ce qu'on va déployer les projets et comment est-ce qu'après ça, on va venir rattacher les autres partenaires, parce qu'il va y en avoir d'autres là, dans notre aventure là, économique qu'on est en train de forger. Donc, c'est une approche tout à fait nouvelle d'Hydro-Québec. Puis je pense que c'est inspirant pour la suite des choses.
For Pieta Shaw, however, Hydro-Québec still has a long way to go.
On connaît assez, on les connaît, parce que moi, ça fait des années que je les côtoie, puis il y a une méfiance, puis la confiance, elle n'est pas encore acquise à notre niveau, puis la réconciliation économique, on est encore loin, parce qu'ils nous entendent, mais est-ce qu'ils nous écoutent, c'est sa question.
Maricela Amador, APTN National News, Montreal.
The federal housing and infrastructure minister made his first visit to Nunavut this week. As part of the visit, he announced that his government will be making some contributions to water treatment plants in the territory. Trevor Wright has that story for us.
This week, the Nunavut and federal governments announced $194 million to go toward 8 infrastructure projects across 6 communities. The federal contribution is $129.9 million, while the territorial government is contributing $64.8 million. The bulk of the funding will be going toward water and wastewater treatment plants in Arctic Bay, Grise Fjord, Pond Inlet, Rankin Inlet, and Resolute Bay.
And it's essential that we recognize that every community in this country, regardless of which region, has safe and reliable drinking water. It's something that we too often take for granted in the South, and it's important that we realize that if we're going to ensure that every community has access to reliable water, that we make the investments to turn that into a reality.
While the funding was previously allocated in the federal budget, Fraser clarified these are new decisions on how to spend some of that funding. Nunavut MP Lori Idlaut said it's a move in the right direction for a territory facing significant infrastructure gaps.
As the MP for Nunavut, I'm always fighting for more resources to come to Nunavut so that we could make sure that there are better supports, better resources that Nunavut can use towards the improvement of well-being, health and well-being for Nunavut.
Additional investments include the purchasing of wheelchair-accessible vehicles in Pond Inlet and Resolute, as well as a $25 million contribution toward the Kivalak long-term care facility in Rankin Inlet, which is already under construction. Trevor Wright, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
It was the second annual National Ribbon Skirt Day on Thursday. We'll have more on that after the break. When it comes to Canadian talent, the Kinsman Foundation's Tele has it all, with live performances from musicians, talented hosts, and esteemed guests. Reporter Rachel May spoke with 2 Saskatchewan artists who are excited to be a part of the show.
For Saskatchewan musicians, Telemiracle is a stage that many dream of performing on. For Dan Bigstone of Regina, that dream is becoming a reality.
That's something that I've always wanted to do, was to be on national television.
Telemiracle allows artists from across Saskatchewan to perform on national television to raise money for the Kinsman Foundation. This is the second time the Big Stone is in the lineup for Telemiracle, following last year's rendition of Chris Christopherson's Help Me Make It Through the Night. The 72-year-old is excited to be on stage again.
Well, if you've got a dream to do it, just go ahead and do it. Don't be afraid.
Since 1977, the Telemiracle broadcasts have raised $159 million that goes to help children with complex medical needs access life-saving support. The show brings together communities across the province to showcase Saskatchewan's rich talent pool. This year, that includes White Bear First Nation's own Tegan Little Chief, as she was announced as a member of the cast.
I'm stoked. I'm pretty excited to see what
what comes with everything.
Little Chief was the winner of the Saskatchewan Country Music Awards Indigenous Artist of the Year for the past 2 years. When she's not in the studio recording covers of famous songs and making her own original work, Little Chief works as an addiction counselor and youth support worker.
Singles are the originals that I've started to come out with. A lot of my story is in there.
Little Chief just put out a new single in December called Need You to Go, which is set to hit radio on January 5th.
Everybody's support is just, it means so much to indie artists, and it's just, I love everybody that takes a chance on listening to my stuff and the other co-writers.
The 20-hour Telemiracle broadcast happens February 24th and 25th in Regina. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
7 Indigenous artists, musicians, activists, and politicians will receive appointments to the Order of Canada. Willie Littlechild, Stephen Point, and Richard Wayne Hill are among the list of names announced last week by Governor General Mary Simon. Willie Littlechild is probably the most recognized name on the list of 78 new appointees. He was commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for 6 years. Innu poet Josephine Bacon is being recognized for her contributions to Indigenous literature and culture. Another appointee is Elder Albert Marshall for his dedication to promoting Mi'kmaq culture, and Inuk opera singer Diantha Edmonds for her mentorship of young Indigenous musicians.
For 250 years, and so
Simon also appointed former British Columbia Lieutenant Governor Stephen Point and first Inuit Senator Willie Adams. As well, Richard Wayne Hill Sr. was made an honorary appointee for preserving Haudenosaunee culture. The ceremony will be held at a later date at Rideau Hall. And on Thursday, people across the country were celebrating the 2nd annual National Ribbon Skirt Day. An event took place at a Winnipeg mall where Indigenous women, girls, and gender-diverse people wore their ribbon skirts with pride. Many people gathered to dance, sing, and watch while ribbon skirt wearers took over Winnipeg's largest shopping center. Ribbon skirts are an important piece of clothing for ceremonies and cultural events. A skirt's significance may be different for each person who wears one, but often symbolize identity, survival, and womanhood. The national holiday came to be after a 10-year-old Saskatchewan girl named Isabella Kulak was shamed for wearing her ribbon skirt to a formal dress day at her school in December 2020. She received international support for the incident after her story was shared online. The school later apologized, and a federal bill was passed to recognize the day.
A community here to support our Indigenous relations. It's so important that if we want to build a community where we are supportive of each other, that we are together and working together, listening to each other and supporting each other. And it's so beautiful to see all of you beautiful human beings here today amongst each other to support our matriarchs in this community, our women that are life givers and birthers of our people.
That's all the time we have for your APTN National News this weekend. For news anytime, please check out our website at aptnnews.ca. I'm Sav Jonesa, and from all of us here at APTN, thanks so much for joining us tonight.